Hi. Is it offensive to say someone is gifted now? I'm Quinn and I'm autistic. And today on Autismatic, we're asking whether it's still okay to call yourself or someone else gifted.
Hello.
I've been learning about autism through study and just being autistic ever since I was diagnosed 40 years ago, and I share some of what I've picked up here on Autismatic. I'm going to be completely open from the start. Whether it's offensive or not, I have some personal baggage with the term gifted, and it's because of that I don't actually like it. I don't get funny with people when they use it, I don't correct them, but I don't use it myself. I'm also aware that the mild sense of the ick I get when someone else uses it is a little irrational, but I think it stems from the aforementioned baggage. But it's caught my attention a few times lately. I've seen a few people suggesting that gifted has become an offensive term online, and that intrigued me enough to put a pin in the subject to come back to later. But I've also been asked the question myself a couple of times recently, and I just saw it come up in the chat on another autistic YouTuber's live stream. So I thought I'd use this tea time to have a chat about it. When we say someone is gifted, it's surely a compliment, isn't it? I don't think anyone is ambiguous about its meaning. Someone who is gifted possesses a rare talent or skill, so to have that recognised by a third party seems, for the most part, to be a positive interaction. There was nothing negative about my parents' intentions in the late 1970s when they joined an organisation that claimed to celebrate and encourage gifted children, such as I was deemed to be, or children with high learning potential, as they like to put it these days. I was 7 or 8 years old at the time my mum and dad got caught up in all this, and they weren't alone. The parents of quite a few bright but troubled kids in the area pricked up their ears too, and before long we were on a mailing list and having meetings in rented out halls. For years, I described it as being like a cult. But then I met actual survivors of real cults and I changed my tune. But before I had that knowledge, it felt like a fair comparison. I may have been a child at the time, but I remember a bunch of Village of the Damned children being ushered into dusty halls by Stepford wives' parents, all nodding along as they were told how their children weren't really outcasts and misfits, but the architects of the future. I didn't like it. I'm not calling out and naming anything or anyone because my memories are old and faded, and there's been decades for those organisations to change. The gifted concept still crosses my path quite regularly now. These 2E or twice exceptional Facebook groups keep approaching me, asking me if I want to feature them on my channel or inquiring why I don't talk about them. I usually just politely decline because I recognise my own bias, and it's unfair to pretend to be ambivalent when I know I'm not. My reasons for not wanting to engage with that small but noticeable side of our community are very personal. I had such negative experiences during childhood which tainted my feelings about the whole concept of giftedness from a young age. Whilst I met some kids in the meetings that I got on with tremendously well, I loathed most of their parents and the organisers. Mind you, I wasn't the only one to feel that way. I've never knowingly run into any of those gifted kids I met back in the 70s in adult life since, but I've met plenty of adults who went to similar meetings or whose parents read the same literature as mine, and not just from back then. Many are millennials and younger who went through it in the 80s, 90s and later too. It's rare I meet anyone who has happy memories of being a gifted child. I don't just mean they had unhappy childhoods, I mean they, like myself, singled out being called gifted and all that came with it quite specifically as having had a negative impact on their life outcomes, their mental health, or both. In many cases, adopting the gifted label was an attempt by our parents to explain away our neurodivergence. I've little doubt that was the case for me. This all happened a few years before I was diagnosed, and remember, the spectrum wasn't formally recognised until the 1990s, so my diagnosis was pretty out of the ordinary when I got it. But lots of the kids I met there were just like me, or we wouldn't have been there. The whole vibe of that group was of bright, talented kids who went unrecognised or didn't fit in at school because they were seen as weird, uncooperative, painfully shy or poorly behaved. The organisers and our parents thought that bringing us together would unlock those talents in a way the education system couldn't, because they just weren't geared up for brilliant youngsters like us. So, a bunch of kids with highly developed intellects or academic skills, but poor social abilities, and a few common annoying habits and traits amongst them like fidgeting, daydreaming, narrow interests, or having sudden outbursts, were brought together by anxious parents who were unhappy with the way their kids were being neglected and underserved by the schools they attended. Sounds a bit like a special needs support group, doesn't it? Trouble is, whilst I'm big enough and ugly enough to realise that my decades-old memories might be a bit fuzzy and jaded by the years in between, my dislike of people showing off hasn't. And calling myself gifted feels like I'm doing exactly that. When I said earlier that gifted has an undeniably positive meaning, it does depend on who's saying it and about whom. Voicing your opinion that a celebrity or maybe a colleague is gifted isn't going to attract much aggro as a rule, but saying it about yourself? Historical baggage or not, I can still see how telling someone you're gifted might come across as just a tad arrogant. Just a little bit. It's like the black catting thing I talked about a couple of weeks ago, but there's nothing ambiguous about it here. One of the most hard and fast social rules of Western society is that we don't go around telling people how brilliant we are, even if we're the best of the best. It's okay to display our trophies, our certificates, our titles, and all the letters after our names, and it's fine to answer questions about our talents and expertise, but that's about it. If I tell someone I'm an autistic storyteller with a growing YouTube channel, they might be interested, might even ask me how many subscribers I've got, whether I enjoy it, that kind of thing. They might even be impressed when I tell them how many viewers have expressed their thanks for my work and how they've grown or been comforted by it. But if I were to express all that by saying, I'm a gifted autistic storyteller, they might not be so indulgent. Thing is, I don't think all the people who describe themselves as gifted really are showing off. I mean, some of them are, law of averages, but a lot of them don't, especially not the autistic ones. To many of us, it's part of the balanced picture we try to portray of ourselves. We're often aware that we have failings, frequently because other people keep reminding us of them, but we want people to know we have strengths too. And if we've been told we're gifted by others, shouldn't it be okay to say it about ourselves? So you might think. But we're not always dealing with people who process like we do. The rules vary from country to country, but as a rule, singing our own praises, however justified we may be, just isn't done. To the average set of Western ears, anyone who describes themselves as gifted sounds a bit arrogant, full of themselves, egotistical. It doesn't stop there. If we describe someone very close to us, especially our own kids, as gifted, we sound a bit cringy too. There really isn't any leeway on this. If you tell someone you're gifted or your kids are, then I don't think you'll be offending anyone, but it still comes firmly under the heading of inappropriate. Changing the language doesn't help much either, which is why saying 2E doesn't wash with most folks. You know people are going to ask you what 2E means, and no matter how nicely they seem to take it in the moment, how sweetly they smile or how sincere their manner, the moment you say twice exceptional, you'll see the corners of their mouths drop. And when your back is turned, they'll be cursing you for thinking you're better than them. If you've got into the habit of telling people you're gifted, I don't have a strategy for you to make it easier, because I don't think this is one you can win or find a compromise on. It doesn't matter how many compliments you throw around the room beforehand, how much you praise everyone else for their achievements or abilities. The moment you tell them you're gifted or exceptional, all that will be forgotten because you broke one of the most heinous of taboos. You pointed out one of your own good points. So, that covers the general use scenarios. When you're in non-autistic company, best not to suggest any kind of enhanced skills or talents unless asked. If somebody says to me, "Hey Quinn, you're good at X," it's okay for me to agree, with sufficient humility, of course. And it's fine to put my hand up when someone says, "Is anyone good at X?" and explain why I'm skilled in that area. But it's not good for me to see X needs doing and then say to someone, "I'm gifted at X, would you like me to do it for you?" I know that when you do that, you're likely thinking what I would be. Hey, there's an opportunity for me to help. Maybe helping people out using my strongest skills will be seen as a good thing. And if you were talking to me, I'd try to respond in kind, because I'd know where you're likely coming from. But that's because I'm from part of the same minority as you. What most people hear you saying is, "I'm picking fault with X, which I see you haven't bothered with, or are so incompetent that you don't even realise it needs doing. I arrogantly believe myself to be superior to you, and so I'm taking this opportunity to point out your inadequacy and altering the social dynamic in my favour." Actually, what they hear is, "Screw you," but that doesn't explain very much, does it? It still adds up to the same thing, though. Saying we or someone close to us is gifted in the company of neurotypical people rarely goes without some sort of negative consequence, even if it's just the loss of a tiny sliver of respect. The twice exceptional folks might think they cracked it, but they really haven't. Yes, they're being a lot more balanced about it. They're not just fixating on gifts, they're just as open that there's disability involved. They're very clear that they differ from the norm because they're disabled, but also because they're gifted. That does make a difference when you're talking to some non-autistic people. It really does. If they're in an indulgent enough mood, plenty of people will get the point you're trying to make. Provided they didn't already label you as a narcissist, a black catter, a show-off, or whatever unpleasant that crossed their mind the moment they heard you use the word exceptional. But what about amongst autistic or other neurodivergent people? Well, it's a bit of a coin toss, to be honest. I don't know that it's quite as close as 50-50, but if you start using terms like gifted or exceptional in neurodivergent company, there's a decent chance you might hit a nerve with somebody, and it could be quite a painful one. I've already told you that I was honoured with the gifted label when I was still in primary school, and it followed me through life. I hated it. I didn't feel special in the way they told me I was supposed to. They were going on about high-flying careers, world-changing discoveries and literary masterpieces to a boy who just wanted to know how to talk to other kids without being laughed at, abused or ignored. Being gifted meant always being pushed to achieve things I really couldn't be asked to even start, let alone finish. It meant untold pressure and expectations were put on me by school and parents alike, and when I didn't live up to the potential, it made them ever more certain that I was maladjusted. I'm not now, and never have been, gifted. I'm just autistic, and I have a regular, normal, spiky skill set. All of my gifts are spikes which are tempered by the troughs, the anti-gifts, if you like.
Please, Spock, do me a favor, and don't say it's fascinating.
No.
but it is interesting.
When nature doles out her gifts in the genetic lottery, there are only so many skill points to go around. What we call neurotypical just means that their skills are relatively evenly distributed, and savants have one or two highly developed skills whilst often struggling with the most basic ones. In between them are the rest of us autists. We're better than average at some things, occasionally way better, but we're below average in others, including some of those essential skills. When I hear the word gifted, I feel sorrow. It brings up memories of disappointed parents and teachers, of punishments and tears, of being accused of laziness, spite, and wasted potential before my age was even in double figures. It reminds me of having to change secondary schools because I couldn't take the bullying and abuse from pupils and staff in the first one, of the first psychologist I was sent to who washed his hands of me, and of countless nights lying awake caught between panic and despair of ever living up to whatever gifted really meant. All it meant for me was pain and self-doubt. I've told that tale a fair few times in the last 40 years. NT folks usually don't know how to take it, but most of the autistic or neurodivergent people I speak to get it immediately. A few have told me they think they'd have liked to have been labelled as gifted. A few were ambivalent about it, and two that I can remember were all in on it. In fact, they're now involved in it all as adults and were going through the same process with their own kids. I only hope that with neurodivergent parents behind them, there's not the same kind of disappointment waiting when they don't live up to their potential. I can't say how many of those people I told it to were autistic. Dozens upon dozens for sure. And there's been a surprising amount of recognition. Those who were singled out as gifted themselves generally weren't comfortable with it, and plenty got bullied by classmates despite or because of it. One friend in particular endured horrific humiliations because he was afraid his parents would blame him for not being gifted enough to avoid being bullied, rather than pursue as abusers. Because this video wasn't planned ahead, I haven't sought permission to share any of those tales as yet, but if I ever do, it'll make for a highly emotional, very poignant film. Being gifted sounds great on paper, and saying it might even feel good whilst it's helping you work up to realising you're not actually worthless, but in the long term, it's a label with huge potential for trouble. A lot of my friends have learned that lesson to their cost, and it made them at the least a little sensitive about the whole gifted thing, and at worst, angrily opposed to it and deeply troubled by anyone identifying themselves that way. So, is saying you're gifted offensive now? I don't think so. Not in the same sense as the N-word or the R-word. I don't think we'll need to refer to it as the G-word anytime soon, but that doesn't mean that its language actually helps us in any way. If you intend saying it around other autistic or neurodivergent people, then tread carefully. I'm very tolerant of it myself, but even I might wince if you say it around me. I personally don't like hurting other people, so when I realise something is triggering for others, even if it doesn't bother me personally, I prefer to respect their sensitivities and drop it. I don't feel I've lost anything or have a gap in my vocabulary now. And since I learned long ago that gifted almost never goes down well in neurotypical company, it isn't something I'd ever think of saying these days anyway. I actually advocate for being sensitive to the differences that make us neurodivergent whilst being mindful of neurotypical expectations and needs, but this one? The reasons might not be the same, but the result is no different. I aim for a peaceful life, and for me it's just a lot less hassle not to say it. Your personal experience, along with your opinions, sensitivities and culture, may be very, very different from mine, and I'm not telling you what to say or do, but speaking for myself, I've managed to live quite happily and write about 500,000 words about autism and neurodivergence in the last few years without needing to talk about being gifted until today. But for all those people I've spoken to before, they're nothing to the thousands who will likely watch this video. And I sincerely hope that amongst those there are plenty of you that don't have any unhappy baggage of your own about being gifted, and that maybe it's not as much of a stone around your neck as it was for me and my contemporaries. Perhaps this video is the one that exposes me as an irrelevant old fart at last. Now, if you've any doubts about how average folks feel about socially awkward but highly talented people telling others how talented they are, if you think that I'm wide of the mark and it's actually fine to do it, just think about this. Across 18 years, 17 seasons and 421 network comedy half hours between them, The Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon got most of their biggest laughs off the back of a single autistic coded and very gifted character. Sheldon Cooper's repetitive insistence on his own brilliance and inability to see his failings infuriated everyone around him. Nobody disagreed with or disrespected his academic skills or his intellectual prowess, but they all resented him and ridiculed him for reminding them of it constantly. And we loved him for it. Because whilst we all saw what a massive pain in the arse he could be, we know we're not that bad. Are we? In fact, I don't think it's a bad rule of thumb in almost any social situation. Once you've gathered all the information, assessed the social dynamic of the room and formulated your opinion, stop for a moment and think to yourself, what would Sheldon Cooper do? And then do the exact opposite. I'm Quinn, and I'm autistic. Thank you for watching. If you've already liked and subscribed and would like to support the channel more, then please follow the Patreon links in the description to pledge what you feel is fair and affordable to help keep the lights on here and the content keep flowing.